You know, it's funny how sometimes the biggest stories in history are tucked away in the tiniest details. In the Gospel of Matthew, there's this one verse. It just describes a simple detour. But behind that little change of plans, there's a story of a ruler so brutal that his name alone was enough to alter the course of one of the most famous journeys ever told.
All right, so let's break this down. On the surface, the verse seems pretty straightforward, right? Joseph hears a guy named Archelaus is in charge, and he's afraid to go there. But why? I mean, who was this guy? What could he have possibly done to get a reputation so terrifying that his name alone sends the Holy Family packing for a whole different part of the country? Well, that is the exact question we are digging into.
And you gotta understand, this decision to skip Judea and head for Galilee instead, this wasn't just some minor tweak to the itinerary. As we're about to see, it was an incredibly smart move, historically speaking. It was a choice rooted in a very real, very well-founded fear of the man who had just grabbed the reins of power.
Now here's a super interesting clue right from the get-go. Look at the title Archelaus was given. Ethnarch. It's not king. It's a step down, basically meaning ruler of a people, or ruler of a nation. You can almost see this as a signal from the big boss in Rome, Emperor Augustus, kind of hinting that, hey, we're not totally sold on this guy's ability to run this show.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the son, you first have to understand the father. And believe me, the apple doesn't fall far from this particular tree. Archelaus came to power in the massive, terrifying shadow of his dad, Herod the Great. And the kingdom he was handed, it was a total powder keg.
I mean, just try to imagine the kind of environment Archelaus grew up in. His father, Herod the Great, was this master of brutal efficiency. But as he got older, he became completely consumed by paranoia. We're talking about a guy who executed several of his own sons, Archelaus' half-brothers, because he was terrified they'd try to take his throne. This world of backstabbing, intrigue, and bloodshed, this is what shaped the man.
So when Herod finally dies, he doesn't just hand the whole kingdom over to one person. Nope. He splinters it into pieces. And this really sets the stage for the challenge Archelaus is about to face. He gets the crown jewel, Judea, Samaria, Idumea. This is the heartland, right? It's got Jerusalem, it's got the temple, but it was also by far the most volatile and toughest piece of real estate to keep under control.
All right, so Archelaus gets the power he's been waiting for, the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. So what's his first move? How does he introduce himself as the new boss? Well, it's with an act of violence so extreme it would define his entire legacy and pretty much confirm everyone's absolute worst fears. 3,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's the rough estimate of how many people were killed in Archelaus' very first major act as ruler. It's a completely staggering figure that sent a crystal clear message about the kind of leader he was going to be.
So how on earth did this happen? Well, picture the scene. It's Passover. Jerusalem is absolutely packed to the gills with pilgrims. Huge crowds start protesting, demanding justice for all the terrible things his father, Herod, had done. So what's Archelaus' response? Negotiation? Dialogue? Nope. Overwhelming, brutal force. He sends his army straight into the temple grounds and just massacres them. In that single moment, any tiny shred of hope that he might be different from his dad was just gone. Poof.
Okay, now this is where it gets really, really telling. To understand why Archelaus was so uniquely terrifying, you have to compare him to his two brothers, the guys who got the other chunks of the kingdom. Because, wow, their reigns could not have been more different.
I mean, this chart just lays it out so clearly. You've got Archelaus in Judea, brutal and incompetent. The result? Constant rebellion. Then you look over at his brother, Herod Antipas, up in Galilee. He was cautious, political, and kept things relatively stable. And then there's the other brother, Philip, who was known for being fair and competent, and he had a long, peaceful reign. The contrast is just, it's night and day.
So here's the bottom line. When Joseph's family is looking for a safe place to land, the choice becomes painfully obvious. Judea, under Archelaus, is just a hot mess of unrest, crazy taxes, and religious meddling. But Galilee, under his brother Antipas, it's way more stable. It was the logical safe haven, not because Antipas was some kind of saint, but simply because he wasn't a reckless, violent tyrant like his brother.
Well, a reign that kicks off with a massacre, that's not going to last forever, is it? Unsurprisingly, the cruelty and sheer incompetence of Archelaus eventually caught up with him, and his downfall was just as swift as his rise was bloody.
In this timeline, wow, it really puts his failure into sharp perspective. His father, Herod the Great, ruled for over 30 years.
His brother Philip also ruled for over 30 years, and Archelaus, he barely made it a decade before he got the boot. It was just a spectacular, total flame-out of leadership.
So what was the final straw? Well, by AD 6, the leaders in both Judea and Samaria had just had enough. They banded together, sent a delegation straight to the emperor in Rome. Augustus summons Archelaus, who's forced to answer for everything. Faced with this mountain of evidence of his cruelty and incompetence, the emperor just strips him of his title, takes all his money, and banishes him to Gaul, what we now call France, where he basically just vanishes from the history books.
And this is where the story has massive, long-term consequences. Archelaus' failure was so complete, so total, that Rome basically said, all right, that's it, we're done letting you guys govern yourselves. Judea was placed under direct Roman rule. This is what brings in a new line of governors, including a very famous one, Pontius Pilate, and it dramatically ratchets up the tensions that are eventually going to explode into all-out war.
Which brings us right back where we started. Full circle, back to that one little verse and the fear that sparked a detour that changed history.
So now, when we read this verse, it just hits different, doesn't it? Joseph's fear wasn't some vague anxiety. No, it was a totally rational, well-informed reaction to a ruler who had already shown the world he was unstable, disrespectful of their religion, and incredibly violent. To go to Judea at that moment would have been like walking straight into a tinderbox with a lit match. So let's just recap the whole thing. Why was this guy so feared? Well, he kicked off his reign with a massacre, in the temple of all places. He governed with this toxic mix of pure brutality and incompetence. He trampled all over religious law, and his territory was a political dumpster fire. The fear that Joseph felt, it wasn't just a gut feeling. It was a smart, completely justified political calculation.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. The disastrous, decade-long reign of this one guy had these massive knock-on effects, right? It put Judea on the fast track to direct Roman occupation, and eventually a massive rebellion. So it really makes you wonder, how different would history have been if a ruler like his brother Philip, the fair and competent one, had gotten Judea instead?